What's up, SDS Nation, and welcome to another episode, and this could be an interesting one, and I'll tell you why in a moment, of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests, and sometimes the very best guest in all of true crime. We've got Loni Coonbs here. She is the only one who has shown up. Both Amy Lawrence Lovely and Amy Zimmercheck are MIA at the moment, but we are going to get through this as one big happy family. Now, for those of you who do not know Loni Coonbs worked as a criminal trial attorney, prosecuting over 50 cases ranging from murders and gang cases to sex crimes and DUI. She's also a veteran legal commentator. You've seen her on CNN, Investigation Discovery, Oxygen, Today, The View, and Dr. Phil. And she is the author of a book with a very long title, You're Perfect, and Other Lies Parents Tell, The Ugly Truth About Spoiling Your Kids, something that I am guilty of doing myself. Now, we are waiting for both Amy Lawrence Lovely and Amy Zimmercheck, also known as Crazy Cousin Eddie's attorney, to hop on, but they are both apparently tied up on some cases at the moment. But we could also get some surprise guests. So without further ado, a quick reminder, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything. On Twitter, we're at Podcast STS. Please support us on Patreon. And as my 7 and 8-year-old daughters say, hit that subscribe button and the like button. It gets the algorithm chugging. We're already getting a lot of comments here, which is good. So let's obviously start with some of the big points from today in court. And that, of course, Loni, the defense says that they are going to rest on Friday in 4 days. Do you believe them?
Well, I do, with the caveat that I tend to talk with a lot of caveats, with the caveat of how long the cross-examination takes. Well, and honestly, I mean, I think the number of witnesses they have and the actual amount of evidence they have to put on, they could definitely be done by Friday, maybe even Thursday. But it just depends on who's doing the questioning. Like Dick likes to go on, and the prosecutor who cross-examined today literally could have done that cross-examination in 1/3 the time. But they all tend to, drone on and on. Even the judge today was getting fed up. But he started making his own objections, stating, and he goes, since I don't hear any prosecutor making the objection, I'll make the objection. I mean, he was just done with it. So, yes, I think they absolutely could be done by then. I don't think there's a ton for them to put on. They had a witness on today that covered actually 2 witnesses who covered a lot of ground for them.
And Loni, I mean, how rare is it to hear a judge objecting on behalf of the state? That was interesting, right?
Well, it depends. We had some judges here in LA County where I was a criminal prosecutor who some of them would take over. I mean, they would take over questioning. They would take over, doing objections because they like to run their courtroom. I've been surprised at how much this judge really sits back and waits for the attorneys to make the objections. And a lot of stuff comes in that I would never seen come in before, hearsay and everything, but nobody's objecting. So they just all let it in. So that's why I was surprised after, 4 weeks, the judge is finally saying, this is it. If you guys aren't going to do it, I'm going to start doing the objections.
And so a lot of the drama today, and we'll get to Buster Murdaugh in a moment, because that, of course, is the big storyline and through line from today's testimony. But back to Judge Clifton Newman. He also scolded the defense team, Jim Griffin specifically, about retweeting a tweet from the Washington Post opinion section that claims police were sloppy in their investigation. And this was the funny part. Judge Newman says, and I quote here, "It appeared on my Twitter feed this morning. Mr. Griffin, was this part of your defense strategy?" It's hilarious that Judge Newman is on Twitter. I didn't expect him to be. And I have to give him a follow. But what's going on here that a member of the defense team, and look at this, we have a surprise guest here. This is J. Taylor Bell joining the fray right now. J. Taylor Bell is a criminal defense attorney out of the great state of South Carolina. When we can't get one or both Amy's, J. Taylor Bell comes in on the drop of a hat. Taylor, how are you?
Just doing some late night work, man.
Yeah. You're doing my work today. Thank you so much. Please meet Loni Coonbs, who is a former LA prosecutor. Guys, Taylor knows the law, especially in South Carolina. We were just talking, Taylor, about Judge Newman scolding Jim Griffin today for tweeting. When you are trying a case, Taylor, do you ever tweet out about it? Probably not the most ethical thing to do.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. That's a no-no.
Well, you know, the funniest thing was the judge said, you know, this popped up on my feed, and he goes, and I don't follow you, Jim. So why is it popping up on my feed? I mean, it's just like
algorithms. That's, you know, algorithms. It all pops up. I get random things that pop up all the time too. I'm like, wow, you actually said that.
Judge Newman's got to take that one up with Elon Musk. But Jim Griffin tried to defend himself, saying it was merely just a retweet. And Judge Newman then talks about how an NBA player was recently fined for retweeting something, which I love. So then Jim Griffin vows to not tweet or retweet anything until the trial is over. So a lot of drama coming in that regard. There was a text I'm looking for here, which I will find. This is the problem, everyone, with doing a live show. There is a text that Tim Jansen sent me. I'll find it. He's a criminal defense attorney out of Tallahassee who was talking about this and how absurd it was. Taylor, while we have you, the first question I had for Loni was, do you think the defense said they're going to arrest Friday? Do you think that's actually going to happen?
I don't believe it.
Why not?
Something else is going to pop up for sure. Everything's popped up in this case so far. There's probably going to be some kind of delay. Prosecution's probably going to cross-examine for, longer than anticipated. Especially if Alec takes the witness stand. So I don't believe it, but we'll see. We'll see if it happens. I expect it probably to end up finishing on Monday and then closings Tuesday is what I expect.
We'll hold you to that. See if it happens. Tilo, who's a New Englander with a New England attitude, a friend of the show. We love her, but she can be tough on me. She is saying Buster's testimony was kind of boring. I think the defense just wanted him up there. The defense witnesses so far have not been impressive. Followed by Mabel, who is one of my beloved viewers. She writes, my heart goes out to Buster. He is also a victim here. Loni, to you, what did you make of Buster being on the witness stand? And did the defense get from him what they needed to, or was he just a showpiece, as Tilo suggested?
First of all, I agree with Mabel. I think that regardless of what you think of the case and everything else, I mean, Buster's whole life just blew up overnight, right? He lost his mother, he lost his brother, and his dad's in prison. So you have to feel for him just as a fellow human being and a young man. It's interesting because I think a lot of people did perceive his testimony as perhaps a ploy on the defense's part. But I'll tell you, and this is what's really interesting about trial strategy. The defense used him in a very effective way. There are a number of points, and I actually made a list that I'll go through real quick. A number of points that the prosecution has made that are good points that they're going to argue in their closing argument. The defense, through Buster, was able to put up alternative theories to explain those points that they'll be able to use, whether Buster was that great or a believable witness or not. They can argue it in their closing argument to give another reasonable interpretation of the evidence. So let me give you an example. We heard about how, based on the charts and the aerials and the car data, that when Alec went to his mom's that night in Alameda, he went past the house, right? He went past the driveway and he went to the back. And it appears that the prosecution is going to argue that as perhaps he was going back there to dump stuff or to hide it. Well, Buster comes up and says, oh, that's a normal way for us to park. Sometimes we park in the front, sometimes we park in the back, and we just go through the back door. It's easier. So right there, it gave the defense another alternative way to argue that evidence that the prosecution looked like they were going to use. Why the wet bathroom, right? It looked like somebody showered quickly. Well, Buster said no. The next day, me, my girlfriend, and my dad went back and we all showered there at Alameda. An excuse for why there's water in the bathroom and there's that, the clothing in the bathroom. Why the t-shirt might be on the ground. Remember look, the t-shirt's on the ground in the closet. That's because Alec was rushing in quickly to change his clothes. Well, Buster said, I'm actually the one who packed his bag when we were leaving for Alameda, and I went up there and I grabbed t-shirts. I don't know, I might have knocked something down as well. He also said that Alec kept clothes everywhere in a bunch of different houses in his truck, so it wouldn't make sense for him to remember where every shirt was or to be able to remember, the clothing here or there. As far as changing his clothes after the tree video, he said, my dad sweats out there when he's working at Moselle. It's very common for him to come in after working and to shower. So he would change his clothes from the tree video to the clothing we saw at the crime scene. Dad calling me from the car while he's driving to Alameda that night. He sounded normal. That's common for us to call each other all the time. He was with his dad constantly after the murders. So when would he have time to go hide this stuff? If he had all of this evidence to hide. He said the shirt in the tree video was not a Colombian shirt, like Blanca said. This was a really interesting one. When they got to the confession, the alleged confession, was it I did them or they did them? He said, no. He said they, and I know because he'd been saying it before. He told me that night of the murders that they did them. And I've heard him say it again. So that's not a confession. He said it was common for Alec to be calling him constantly. And this was really interesting. He said it wasn't unusual for Alec to leave his phone at the house when he went down to the kennels because the cell site was so spotty. And I was really watching the body language of Buster very closely. And there were certain times when, just based on, I'm not a body language expert, I'm not going to say that, but being a mother, a grandmother, I know how to read faces when some people aren't telling the truth. And there were certain times when it looked like he was like sort of, putting forth something that maybe he didn't totally believe. And that was definitely one of the times that I perceived that. So there were a lot of things they were actually able to get from Buster, just like a little checklist that they'll use for when they want to argue this evidence that the prosecution is going to argue. They're going to put up this alternative way to interpret that evidence that may swing towards the defense.
I'm glad you came so well prepared, Loni Coonbs. Thank you. So some sad news to report. We lost another juror today, apparently, and there was COVID going around. And I found out the reason that Amy Zimmercheck is not on this live tonight is because she has COVID herself. So we're wishing Amy all the best health and to get better, especially if there's any plans. But I think the ship has sailed already. I don't think we're going to see Curtis Smith, Cousin Eddie, on that witness stand anytime soon. Carrie G writes, I really thought the defense was going to come out swinging. I was disappointed. To you, Taylor, I got this tweet from Tim Jansen, who's a very seasoned criminal defense attorney who's on the show frequently in Tallahassee, Florida. He sent me this text message. How can Buster be a witness in the case if he was sitting in the courtroom watching all the evidence and other witnesses testify? There is a rule of sequestration which prohibits witnesses from watching others testify and then be a witness. Looks like the state forgot to invoke the rule. Why is he up there if he was watching all the proceedings, Taylor?
We don't have actually a rule that requires sequestration. You've got to move before the court to sequester witnesses here in South Carolina. Typically also because he's considered a victim underneath our victims' rights statute. He's entitled to be in the courtroom for all of the proceedings, whether or not he is a potential witness as well. I've made some fun moves in the courtroom, moving to sequester witnesses by issuing subpoenas on individuals and then moving to sequester them when they've been so-called alleged victims in cases that I didn't necessarily believe that they were victims, but trying to get around some of that stuff to keep them out of there so that they can't see what other people have testified to. I've been successful before, and I've lost that motion before when they moved to quash my subpoena based on them being a victim. So that's why he was in there. is because he would have a right to be in there. And I do believe that he did learn a lot of what was testified to by being in there. So he had an opportunity. And I think Jim also kind of mentioned that too. You heard this, right, in his questioning of Buster. So it kind of, made him sort of a focal point in the case. And he is a victim here, for sure. He lost his mother. He lost his brother. His life completely changed. So I believe he was entitled to be in there. But I agree. It's interesting that he was one of the very first people they called to the witness stand, and he'd already seen all the evidence that was presented.
And Loni, did you find that strange at all, or no?
I found it strange throughout the whole trial that apparently all the witnesses can sit in there, and that, even the law enforcement and expert witnesses will get up and they'll refer to other witnesses in front of the jury. They'll say, well, you heard so-and-so say this to you. I mean, we don't do that in LA. Like, no one's allowed in the courtroom. And if they do somehow hear someone else's testimony, they get objected to, and it's tainted. You heard this, it's, influencing your testimony. And I was going to ask Taylor if that's common practice in South Carolina to let the witnesses sit and listen, because I would think that as a juror, unless that's just the way everybody does it, you'd sit there and think, well, everybody's listening to each other. So how do you know if they're, testifying to what just they know, or are they being influenced by everybody else's testimony?
I moved to sequester most witnesses if they're fact witnesses. In terms of experts, I would want my experts in there to hear what they had to say, because I would have my expert then, if it was a forensic pathologist, I want my own pathologist in there so that he can correct or she can correct, whatever has been said by the government's expert. If there is some kind of review that they did or didn't do as to why they may have an incorrect conclusion at the end, I always ask that they be in there. Now that costs extra money because they're in there spending their time and not doing their actual work. So, sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't do that. But fact witnesses, I always move to sequester because then you can point out inconsistencies. But if they sat in there and watched and listened to what other folks said, it's going to definitely taint their testimony. I don't recall whether or not there was a motion to sequester any of the witnesses. And always typically the lead investigator on a case, if it's their case in the state of South Carolina, the judge is going to allow the lead investigator to sit at the table with the prosecutors in prosecuting the case.
We have that too.
Yeah, I'm going to keep getting the comments as we go through this hour. Carrie G writing, Poot and his crew, Dick Harpootlian and his crew act so arrogant. I was certain they had something amazing. Another person said the defense got off to a really weak start. CKS says next week is hopefully closing arguments. If Taylor is right, that will be the case. Shivani, let's hear about Burper whoops Buster. And of course, the most important comment right here, again from Chilo, love Loni. Who doesn't love Loni? Now, Eric Bland tweeting out, and I do follow Eric Bland. He was on the program yesterday. In my opinion, there was a serious lost opportunity in the way Buster Murdaugh was cross-examined this morning. No reason to be rude to him, but just establish that he knew nothing about what happened between 7 and 10 p.m. on the night of the murder, and ask him all the things, and it cuts off there. And maybe just add in there, when did you find out that your father stole $3.4 million from a woman you grew up loving named Gloria Satterfield? That is his client, by the way, who is paid $10 an hour. What are your thoughts about that? So do you, Taylor Bell, feel like the state missed an opportunity with their cross of Buster by not going at him a little harder, keeping in mind you've got to be sensitive to a victim and especially a younger person?
So yes and no. It's a double-edged sword here, because you've got to respect the fact that he lost, he lost his mom, he lost his brother. That's something that you have to tiptoe around, because, all about asking questions and the way you present yourself in court is about gaining the trust of the jury. At the end of the day, you want the jury to trust you as an attorney, as an individual talking to them, because you're going to be asking them to do something for you at the end of the day. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to go back there and advocate for you. If you can get one or two witnesses on your side and they go back there and go to bat for you as an attorney in that room because they trust you and they think that you are the one that's being most forthcoming, most honest with them, they're going to go to bat for you. And that's all you need in this case. That's all you need, is at least one or two of them to go to bat for you. And so while I know Eric and I used to be in spin classes together at the gym. We worked out together many years, not many years ago, but we worked out together for many years in some Thursday night spin classes, and I even some 5 a.m. spin classes here in Columbia. So I know Eric well. I like the fella. We happen to be on different sides many times. But it's a double-edged sword. He's got some accurate statements there. He should have gotten out, I think, from the prosecution. You don't know anything about what happened.
And Eric is a gym rat. If you follow him on Twitter, he shows you certain exercises to do. But Taylor Bell, man, he's a wrestling coach. So I think he would take Eric Bland if it came down to it. So this comment made me laugh a little bit, and I'll tell you why. From Meadow Cubana, offering multiple short assassins was ludicrous and unbelievable. We're going to get to some of the forensic expert testimony in a minute, but I made a kind of joking comment a few episodes back that the defense was going to come out and say that Tattoo from Fantasy Island, for those of you who know the reference, that Dick Harpootlian was going to say he was a shooter, because obviously he's going after the fact that it was a vertically challenged human being. I mean, just off the cuff here, Loni, are you expecting Dick Harpootlian to evolve this theory at all? Because a lot of people are anticipating a two-shooter theory. Is that still where you think he might be going with this? Because he keeps harping, pun intended, I guess. I didn't mean to say that, actually. But he keeps harping on the fact that it is coming from a very low angle. So what's going on here?
Yeah, I think he's, it's sort of a double argument there. One is that the shooter needs to be between 5'2" to 5'4". He said that over and over and over again today. And that obviously Alex isn't that. And also throwing out there the theory that there's two shooters here. Now, it's interesting because their own expert said it could be two, it could be one. He didn't really have a problem with either one. So his own expert said it's possible for it to be one shooter. I thought I think the jurors got it very clearly that you don't have to be 5'2", 5'4" to shoot that shot. I mean, you can be in different positions. You can be moving. You can be at a different angle. So I thought the fact that he harped on it as long as he did for hours, and that the prosecution then pushed it even farther, sort of with a little snarky edge to it, that now it's a 12-year-old, doing the shooting because it was someone so short. And being right in that range myself, obviously I'm not a 12-year-old, so you don't have to be 12 to be between 5'2" and 5'4". I thought the most effective thing was when the prosecutor at one point, and this could have been just really all of his cross-examination, he got down on one knee, held the gun, and measured it and showed that that was a perfect height. If you're just down on one knee shooting, that works. Done. So I think that, yes, you're going to hear 5'2" to 5'4" from Dick. You're going to hear 12-year-olds from the prosecution. And I think the jurors are going to go, oh, please, look, we know that people can move. And I think common sense comes through that, and that the jurors will just kind of cut through it.
And that's what I meant there. That's disingenuous.
Yeah.
When you say that was that Fernandez that said that? Was that David, the one that was cross-examining?
He's the young guy. I don't know what his name was, but he's
it's David. He used to be a city prosecutor here in the city of Columbia before he went to the Attorney General's office. I mean, that's a bit disingenuous here. Don't say 12-year-olds. I mean, that's not. No one believes that at all. and I'm still not buying the whole theory that there wasn't some kind of altercation that took place down there. Because, if you're falling backwards, you could, you could be shooting at a different angle. If you're crouched down, you could be sitting at a different angle. I'm not buying the whole that there was no kind of altercation down there. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that the defense has it all right, but there's a whole lot we don't know here.
Altercation between who?
I don't know. We're never going to know what happened. Bottom line, we're never going to know what happened down there, because still, the biggest thing I can't get over is if Alec was taking a nap, how does he not hear 2 shotgun blasts and then 5 300 rounds go off? That'd wake you up.
It's pretty impossible, but I've heard theories thrown out there that, Paul didn't die from the first shot. Maybe he went after Alec. Alec, as Taylor just suggested, maybe he fell backward or had to crouch down. Who knows? But Taylor's right, too. I don't think we're ever going to know the answer to that. But Taylor, to you, Tim Jansen, who was on a texting spree today, again, the lawyer from Tallahassee, he texted me saying Mike Sutton, this is the basically guy breaking down the shooting here, the witness, the expert witness for the defense. And Tim writes, Mike Sutton was a horrible witness, not prepared, had no basis for his assumptions. He never takes into account the shooter was squatting or bending down. Dick was a fool to call this witness. Maybe he's the only one he could hire to make these crazy opinions. Your response, Taylor?
I think that's a bit harsh. I think Dick got out the information that he needed to get out. That's kind of saying that, hey, everything that the government says, this isn't quite 100%. There are some other possibilities. I don't think he came off as credible, though, as the state's witnesses in the crime scene reconstruction. I think the state's witnesses came off more credible. He wasn't paid an exorbitant fee, though, so I didn't get a whole bunch out of that. I mean, everybody gets paid to do their job, so I think the defense the state tried to make something out of that people don't get up here and do work for free. So
yeah, I think it was making $3.50 an hour, chump change for defense attorneys. But go on, Loni.
Well, I thought it was interesting because literally the defense put him up like a jack of all trades, right? He's going to talk about, reconstructing the shooting scene. He's going to talk about the acoustics. He's going to talk about the speed of the car. And when they were at the very beginning, they're supposed to qualify this witness as an expert in all those areas. And I was thinking, if I was the prosecutor, object, don't agree to the qualifications, don't accept him as an expert. They didn't raise an issue at all. They could have said, we want to take him on voir dire. We don't think he's an expert in any of these areas. I mean, that's when you're supposed to make that objection. And it just reemphasizes to the jury, hey, wait a minute. We shouldn't be just accepting this guy as an expert. The prosecutor doesn't think he's really qualified. And let's look at him more, suspectly that way. And I think it came out, like Todd said. I mean, I just don't think he came across as really necessarily a credible expert in all of those different areas that the defense was trying to get him to cover everything.
Hey, Loni, what's the rule for qualifying as expert in California?
Well, I can't quote it right off the top of my head.
So
but
I'm just wondering, like, we have Dalbert here. And so I'm just trying to figure out, it doesn't take much to qualify somebody as an expert. Well, in South Carolina, I mean, I could probably be an expert in all sorts of fields that I definitely would not say that I'm an expert in. So,
well, it's interesting you say that because Mandy Powers Norell, who is a friend and guest on this show and was on last night's episode, she tweeted this out. And this is an exchange today between the state and the forensic expert. Have you ever taken a pathology class? No. Have you ever had any training in firearms? No. Have you ever done any studies on what happens to a bullet when it leaves a gun? Yes. What kind of studies? All kinds of studies. It's just like, I mean, it's kind of insane.
Mandy. I've got cases with her right now.
Yeah. And the studies he was talking about were his own testing. They weren't like studies had done that were peer reviewed. And that was the problem. At one point, the prosecution was objecting, saying, talking about, no expertise. And the judge goes, you accepted the expertise. So it kind of threw it back in the prosecution. So I agree with you, Todd, in that it's very easy. And I think this judge especially, I mean, he's qualified everybody, and I think he would allow this witness to be qualified as well. But I just think it raises that little flag in front of the jury, and it lets the judge know too that you're going to keep pushing that issue. It's one of those strategy things. Yes, they may be qualified, but it just kind of lets you keep pushing on the expertise of that witness. And the prosecution did some. I mean, they kept, are you a pathology? Do you have any training in these areas? And they did bring that up, but I think that would have been another nice way to kind of raise that red flag.
A quick shameless plug. If you haven't, please hit the like button. It helps that algorithm. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I made the decision this whole week leading up through the end of the trial, we're going to go live. We stopped doing lives, but we're having so much fun with these crazy, disorganized live shows. We're going to keep them going. We were supposed to have 2 other guests on. One has dropped from COVID. We hope Amy Zimmercheck gets better. And Amy Lawrence Lovely, she has disappeared into the ether. But Randy Ward has a comment. State was great today, totally destroyed the expert. And we're a little all over the place, but I like this because this is how my mind works. And Loni and Taylor are both smart, so I know their minds work in mysterious ways too. YT3 writes, Maggie's blood was found on the steering wheel of Alex Suburban. And that is something that I don't think we've heard quite enough about, followed by this comment from Sell All, negligible amounts of Maggie's blood and nothing from Paul, which wouldn't be possible if Alex Murdaugh was the shooter. Loni, should there be a bigger deal made about this blood found inside the SUV?
First of all, I kept calling you Todd. I'm sorry, Taylor. Your name is Taylor. Sorry about that.
Don't worry, I've been told a whole lot worse. I can promise that regularly.
I think that there will be a lot more made about the DNA and the trace evidence that was found around. I think that you keep going into different areas. I like the fact that the people that are tweeting keep bringing these things up, because I hope the jury continues to remember those things. But when you're laying out, just from the attorney's point of view, when you're laying these things out, you're trying to get the evidence that you need from the witness that is on the stand. And you don't necessarily get to keep pulling back the other pieces of evidence from the other witnesses. Although I will say that in this trial, I have seen Dick in particular just start going on a little rambling tangent about, bringing in commentary on, the status of the case at that point, and just start talking about things that might not be a question to the witness, and just laying out sort of theories that pull in other pieces of the case. So I am seeing that from Dick, but usually it's just the questioning, which is why trials in real life are not as exciting as trials on TV, right? Because on TV, the attorneys do that. They'll lay out and they'll go, oh, and remember that blood that was on the street, so things like that.
Although this one's pretty good. It's pretty intriguing. CKS57 Uto, if I'm coming close to saying it correctly. All jury has is bad detective work. I think they're saying OnStar data is not accurate. I live in a place where the internet is constantly lagging and phone service spotty. Taylor, do you think that's really the case, that all the jury has is bad detective work? I don't think that's the case.
I don't believe that. And I'm a defense attorney. I think the data is relatively accurate. I think that's going to be ultimately what they rest their decision on, unless Alec has some really, really good explanation to that timetable. I think they're going to rest everything on the data behind it as investigation. I'm going to be bluntly honest. I wish the government would spend as much time and energy in cases that I have where I see a lot shoddier investigation as they have in this case. I really do. It also shows to the privilege in which Alex has. They're doing everything they can to investigate this case. When I was a public defender, I saw people go away for a lot longer on a lot shoddier work that was done because it wasn't in the news. So to me, it kind of burns me the wrong direction, the amount of money that they've spent. I heard that they purchased a vehicle to be the exact vehicle that he was driving. Mm-hmm. Never in my years as a public defender have I ever seen the government spend those kinds of funds in investigating a case to try to get to an answer. But then again, it's not a case on TV. It's a poor person that they don't care that much about, and it doesn't do a whole lot for the election cycle when they run for attorney general again. This is doing a whole lot, in my opinion, and so they're going to want to get a conviction. However, I don't think it's been a real shoddy investigation. I do believe that they probably weren't keying in on him at first, and so that they were allowing him to grieve a bit, and then they kind of all signs pointed, hey, we don't have an alternative, so let's look at this direction. Things weren't kind of adding up.
I think you bring up some interesting points there. A bunch of the people we had on last night, I think all three actually, were predicting a hung jury. And I asked, thinking that there would be, the state would retry the case almost right away. And the lawyers we had on last night, Eric Bland being one of them, said that they should just try him for the financial crimes because that will essentially put him away for life. Loni, do you agree with that? I mean, to Taylor's point of, spending an excessive amount of money, the state that is spending an excessive amount of money, that if it was to be a hung jury, maybe it is better to just try him for these financial crimes where they have a better shot of putting him away?
I think that's not a bad idea. Look, this is not an easy prosecution case on the criminal case. I don't think anyone would say that. I think it was, the facts aren't the easiest. There are facts. I think that it is a winnable case, but I don't agree with the theory that the prosecution laid out from the very beginning. I would have taken a very different approach. I think a lot of decisions they made early on about how to put this case on might not have been the best for the case in the long run. My understanding is under South Carolina law that these financial crimes are under your 3 strikes law, which means that he's looking at LWOP on that, which is the same punishment he's looking on this case. And he's already given some confessions of admission, right, in some of the financial cases. So it makes sense to, go there and get the convictions there if you can, because you're going to end up getting essentially the same punishment. Now, I've also heard rumors that just because the potential is LWOP on the financial crimes, that doesn't mean he'll get LWOP there either. So I don't know as far as, the exact punishment that would happen, but the criminal case is not an easy case. And obviously it has the highest standard of proof that you have to reach. And as far as the hung jury, I think that's a very real possibility. And obviously it depends on how it hangs. I mean, if it's 11 for guilty, then the prosecutor might, want to jump right back in. But if it's 10, 6-6 or whatever, it's a hard road to hoe. And we can see how hard this case was. This was not an easy trial to put on. I'm sure this is very expensive to the taxpayers because it's going on and on. So I think they would think long and hard before they tried it again.
And that's a really good point, depending on how the jury votes. Once they do, LWOP, by the way, life without parole, not patrol. Go ahead, Taylor.
I'm not. So over Christmas, I was at some Christmas holiday get-togethers. There were some agents there and whatnot, and kind of, we were throwing back. They should, easiest cases to go forward on are the financial crimes. If you want to put them away, but that's not sexy, right? Financial crimes is not sexy. It's not, the prosecutor doesn't get to get on TV and show, hey, we convicted him of these financial crimes, right? The prosecutor gets to do that here. Now, I am not certain that the financial crimes would be eligible for LWOP. Okay, LWOP, we have what's referred to as 2 strike and 3 strikes in South Carolina. 2 strikes for what's deemed to be a most serious offense. So if you have one most serious offense and you get convicted of a second most serious offense, then it's an automatic. You get served with life with the intent to seek life without the possibility of parole. If the prosecutor files that, then it's automatic. The judge can do nothing other than sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. I don't believe any of the financial crimes are considered most serious offenses in South Carolina. The alternative is 3 strikes, which is serious offenses. So any combination of most serious or serious offenses can reach mandatory LWOP, which has to be served notice of, and the judge has no discretion. I am not sure, based on what I know. Maybe it is a most serious. I think maybe the breach of trust is that they charged him with, but then that would mean they'd have to try 3 and convict him of 3, not get him plead to 3. And if they got him to plea, they couldn't serve him because no defense attorney would plead him to 1, knowing they're going to try to get him convicted of the next, then it's mandatory life. So no defense attorney would ever do that. So the idea that they could get life, yes, it's possible, but you would have to have a really dumb defense attorney that allowed them to plead him guilty. But then you could go to trial if you wanted to go to trial on all of them. But so they'd have to go to trial on 3 separate ones at that point. And that would be use of resources as well. But then again, if you pled him guilty to everything and you go in front of a judge, you're going to get a significant number of years that he's never going to see time outside of prison.
But here's the interesting thing, and this is what I was talking about, how Dick kind of goes off and brings in evidence in front of the jury that really isn't appropriate just by him talking about it. He said in front of the jury, this is to a witness, he's being charged with all these financial crimes. He's facing LWOP on that. So he, essentially saying to the jury, don't worry, he's going to go away for a long time. So don't feel like you have to punish him here. He's going to go away on those. And as far as whether you go on the murder case or the civil case, I agree with you. The murder case is sexier. It got a lot more attention. But usually in determining that as well, there are victims of the family members of the murder victims who are crying out for justice, right? They want that trial. In this case, it's Alex's family, right? Now, I don't know if Maggie's family has been crying out for a jury trial, but I don't know if Buster wanted a jury trial or not. I don't know that, Alex's family wanted a jury. I mean, it's all mixed together, right? The victims and the defendant's family, it's all kind of the same. So you don't necessarily have that side of the victim's family crying out for this. We need justice through a trial in this case. So it's interesting that they decided to go. Well, once they filed the criminal case, the defense was smart. They just said, we're not waiving time. We're going to trial. And it pushed the prosecution. So we had to go to a criminal jury trial, which was smart.
We don't have waiver of time either here, which is wild. I've got a murder case still pending that's 5 years old.
Wow.
So I mean, we've got cases that pen. They strategically filed that to push the government forward on this, to try to rush them, thinking they would not have the resources and energy to try it that quickly. They did that, as well as Dick. He's a Senate or State House member. South Carolina Senate member, and he gets protection while Senate's in session. And they're in session right now. So he waived that in order to move forward on this case. So that's interesting too. They wanted this to go forward in this amount of time.
Yeah.
And speaking of Dick Harpootlian, Jeanette R. writes, and this was something that happened, as if there hasn't been enough drama in this trial so far. Today, Dick Harpootlian pointed a gun, and Jeanette R. writes, sick, pointing gun at prosecution team, laughing and saying, tempting. Gun is prop for satire, ? This was with the forensic expert. And then I have a tweet here from Emancipation. She tweeted out, imagine a state senator, Dick Harpootlian, pointing a weapon at state prosecutors in a double homicide trial, and with a smile tells them, tempting. Harpootlian, what a great guy. How on earth is this normal? Is this an American thing? I guess Emancipation is not from the great United States of America. But Loni, was that a disturbing moment in court today when that happened?
For me, it was absolutely. Now, and there was some stuff on Twitter saying, well, when he started pointing in that direction, one of the prosecutors kind of went up like this, joking or whatever. And then I just don't think, especially in a courtroom, you ever joke about guns. I mean, this is a murder case with guns, right? And there were a lot of people in that courtroom, and I know that, the guns are all checked to make sure they're safe, but it is not something that you use as a prop. I mean, this is a real gun. And I thought it was extremely inappropriate. I was surprised that the prosecution didn't say something. I was surprised the judge didn't say something. There were also, and part of the laughter sounded like it was from the audience, but there was also been some laughter throughout this trial, like even during the autopsy stuff with the two victims, when they were sort of reenacting some of the things and it got a little awkward, there was some laughter. And I don't know if it was from the audience or from the jury. And I know sometimes that's sort of a release of tension. But once again, I keep thinking these are victims we are talking about. These are real wounds we're talking about. And so there's been some time when there's laughter and levity that I just don't think is appropriate. And this was clearly one of them.
Taylor, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think the defense uses too many guns. I think the only people at that table that shoots guns regularly is probably Alec. No pun intended, outside of this or otherwise. But I don't. And I don't think they had proper care and handling of that. Again, it goes back to the trust. You want the jury to trust you. And if you don't act like it's serious, they're not trusting you. I mean, serious doesn't necessarily always mean, button up suit like that. Serious means, hey, you're taking their time serious. You're taking the subject matter serious. But the contrary to that is, the only alternative to laughter is crying, right? Because as attorneys, Loni, we see sad things every single day. And, having been a public defender, there's things that I probably inappropriately laugh about with my attorney friends because my only other reaction is to cry because it's so damn bad. Like it's awful that these things happen. So I see both sides of that, but you've got to, again, get the jury to trust you. And if you're willy nilly with a firearm, that's not going to get the jury to trust you.
Yeah, and I'm a believer in levity, but probably not joking about guns in a double murder trial where two guns were used. But back to Buster on the stand for a couple of minutes just to round that out. And Loni gave us some really good information. 10:21 this morning, Buster testifies that he would talk to his parents, quote unquote, pretty much every day, and goes on to say he would talk to them several times a day. And then Jim Griffin goes through a call log. Obviously, a lot of this is rehearsed. 12 minutes after the state's timeline for the murder of Paul and Maggie, Buster receives a call from Alex Murdaugh. Jim Griffin asks, what is his demeanor in the conversation? Again, 12 minutes after the murders. And Buster says, normal, probably one of the most regular occurrences. And then they continue on, the defense asking if he was aware of his father's drug addiction. And Buster says he was aware of his rehab and several at-home detoxes. And then Buster says when he found out about the murders, I was in shock, he says. And then we go to some comments here. Arizona Gal says Buster is covering for his dad, followed by Vicky Casaferic. Buster got kicked out of law school for cheating. I don't believe anything he says. Taylor, by default, being the son of someone who's now proven to be a pathological liar, is a jury going to disbelieve what he says? Is it going to be hard for the defense, who've already had him on the stand, obviously, but to give him any sort of credibility whatsoever?
I mean, you're not the product of necessarily what your father is, as your kids are not, necessarily who their parents are. You see that all the time. I don't think that you can sit there and just say because your dad's a liar, you're a liar. That doesn't make sense. And the idea of trying to bring out these other things about Buster, this is not the time and place, in my opinion, to do that. It's just, the jury's not going to hear that. It's not the time and place. I do believe that he's a victim in this case, no matter whether or not he's sitting there. Nobody wants to believe that their father committed a murder. Nobody wants to believe that their mother committed a murder. Nobody wants to believe any of that. So they're going to hang on to that little bit of hope that they didn't do it, because that makes it better for them. It allows them to sleep at night, and it gives them hope that maybe one day I'll still have my dad in my life outside of prison walls. So I feel for him. He's very, very conflicted here. So I don't think that he's necessarily purposely covering. He's answering the questions that were posed to him. So I think Loni mentioned kind of his mannerisms when he answered some of the questions that might not have been 100% accurate. However, I don't think he's lying about those questions. I think that they're pulling them out of him because it's the narrative that they need to go into closing arguments and argue these things.
Sell all writes, Buster obviously thinks he didn't do it, meaning Alec. He was closer to his mom, and his dad destroyed his life by being a scumbag. If Alec is guilty, Buster doesn't want to believe it, in my opinion. And as much as people may not love Buster because of his affiliation with his father, I think Taylor raises a good point that his life came crumbling down here, and he is not responsible for his father's actions, including if he did in fact kill Maggie and Paul. So at the end of the day, he is considered a victim, and I guess we should all try to find some empathy in our hearts for him, unless you totally believe otherwise. Loni, I wanted to ask you, what do you think right now, as it stands at this moment, is the state's strongest piece of evidence? Is it that video where we hear Alex's voice, or is it something else? Is it the OnStar information?
I still think it's number one, the kennel video that puts Alec there at 9:40 or 8:44. But then to make that strong, you have to put in the cell phone data, which, the phones go dead at 8:48, 8:49, which makes it why it's so important he's there at the kennel. I still think that is going to be just the basic first question that the jury is going to want to know. Okay, if he was at the kennels, why did he lie about it? And if he wasn't the killer, why didn't he hear the gunshots? And why didn't he tell anybody? And then I think that the rest of it, the data, the timeline, the movements back and forth, that's all, if it's argued well by the prosecution, that can help bolster it. But I still think that is the rock solid base for the prosecution to start out, is that kennel video, putting him there at that scene. And the fact that he lied about that. I mean, obviously he's a liar. He's lied about all the financial crimes, etc. But this lie was about where he was at the time of the murders. That's a big lie that's much more important than all those financial lies in the past.
And Taylor, to that, is that a point that can be overcome by the defense, that he basically created this false alibi that's been proven to be untrue, and then we do hear his voice just minutes before these murders occur?
I still don't know what the defense's theory is, honestly. I still have not honed in on that one theory that wins the case. They've kind of taken this, shotgun approach that, hey, I'm going to throw all these little pieces and see what sticks. That doesn't work. That's not the theory that you want. The theory of, hey, my guy did it, but you can't prove it, is not the theory that you go for. So I'm still really, really confused as to what their theory is so far, because maybe I've seen them hinting at a two-person approach. Maybe I've seen them hinting at, that somebody was out there after, after his family. Maybe. I don't know.
That's really interesting to me, because we've been hearing up to this point that the state's motive, that he was trying to get empathy for these financial crimes, was a weak motive, but it's a motive and a theory. And you're saying, and I agree with you, the defense really hasn't brought forth a feasible or a plausible theory. Is that a problem, Loni?
It's absolutely a problem. Absolutely a problem at the day because you hadn't gotten that juror that's going to fight for you back there. That makes sense to go back. That makes sense. That's reasonable doubt, and you need that person. As Loni said, unless there's a really good explanation for that video and that lie as to why he didn't put himself down there and he's covering up for something, by God, now's the time to get up and say something. Okay. I mean, now is the time to get up and say something, because whether you have the right to remain silent. Now, he should have never spoken to law enforcement to start with. Let's just be bluntly honest about that. I never let clients talk to law enforcement to start with. I go and have them take a polygraph, and if it works for me, then maybe I might share that information. But my client is not going in there and answering open-ended questions for law enforcement whatsoever, because then it's going to come back and bite them in the road if they have to testify. But unless there's a really good explanation, and a good explanation of where these clothes are, that at the end of the day, I think last time I was on here, I forgot to give a shout out to my Grammy because she helps with my laundry too. My wife called me out on it. She says, my mom, Grammy, she does your laundry too. And she's real hurt about this. She irons my shirts and all that kind of stuff. She loves laundry, but so
make sure she subscribes. Make sure she subscribes and she watches this episode. Loni, the point that Taylor is raising about the defense not really having a theory, I'm no lawyer, so I didn't really think that through till just now. Is that problematic?
Well, I think that's going to be the biggest prosecution argument. The problem with that, again, though, is it's the prosecution that has the burden of proof, right? So the defense can go without a strong theory if the prosecution doesn't make their case. If the prosecution doesn't have a cohesive theory, well, then, you're not getting beyond a reasonable doubt. But I like the way you're thinking, Taylor. I hope that's the way the jury thinks, is that, the defense really hasn't put on a clear theory. But I also agree, which I think is what you're hinting at, and that is that, really the only person who can do that for the jury is Alex Murdaugh, taking the stand and explaining to them.
And Loni segues us right into that's the other big question. Does he take the stand, Loni?
I think he does. I think he shouldn't, but I think he does first and foremost because, he's a big narcissist, and we know that narcissists love to take the stand. He's an attorney. These are his people. He wanted to be in Colleton County. He feels, and everybody talked about his great talent, his gift is to be able to relate to people and get them to feel like he is there for them, helping them, taking care of them. It was amazing when they said on all the financial crimes, they went back to talk to all the clients, and none of them had any idea that he had stolen all this money. They all still thought he was the greatest guy in the world. So I think that he truly believes that he can talk to these jurors and explain to them. And I think that he will, do this. Hey, you know what? I messed up on the financial crimes. I had this addiction. I did all these horrible things. I hurt my family, and I'm so, so sorry. But, and draw that line, I would never kill my family. I would never do that. And we know juries, people, human beings, they feel comfortable with that. They like to hear, okay, somebody's going to admit some guilt. They're going to take some responsibility, and then they're more likely to believe, oh, well, then maybe they didn't do this part, because we're hearing them get up on the stand and do it. So whether it's a good idea for him to do it or not, do I think he will, just based on the context of the case and knowing what I know about him from this case? I think he will.
And can I ask one question?
Yeah. Go.
Why? You said he shouldn't. Why? I just want to know from your perspective.
Well, I'm saying, okay, so I'm saying he shouldn't, just because everyone says defendants shouldn't take the stand. And if there's always a very strong argument for the defense to say, which is they didn't even make the burden of proof, right? They didn't even make the burden of proof. Once they put the defendant on the stand, the burden's kind of shifted. Let's be honest. In the jurors' minds, the burden is now on what do we believe him or not? And if we believe him, we're going with him. If we don't believe him, we're going to convict him. It's almost like the onus is off the prosecution. We're now going to focus on the defendant.
I think that's reasonable. I wanted to know what your theory on that was.
Yes. Real quick,
I
Janice Peace writes, why wouldn't the defense try to at least make someone else like Cousin Eddie look like they could be involved and call him to testify? Taylor, do you want to take that? And also, what is your thought about Alec taking the stand?
I don't think Eddie can be forced to testify because he's got criminal charges of his own and he can plead the fifth. So if Amy's doing her job, she'll tell him don't talk because you could acknowledge something that could convict you and end you up in the Department of Corrections. So I don't think, unless there's some type of agreement or some type of cooperation, that he would be called to the witness stand, as well as I kind of been told that he's kind of a wild card here, and you never know what the witness is going to say. So you don't call somebody that you don't know what they're going to say. I mean, I don't know. Do y'all have depositions in California that you can use in criminal trials? Can you take those for witnesses? No. Okay. We can't either here. I've heard of some states that they can depose witnesses in criminal trials, and I think that's the oddest thing. I've never heard of it here. We do it in civil cases, obviously, but
right.
But yeah.
So Sarah Ford, she was on the show last night. Love Sarah Ford. She was on Law and Crime today. She's all over the place. Don't forget where you got your start, Sarah Ford. She writes, no one asked for an order of sequestration. And going back to why Buster was on the stand. Someone here, who is this? Loco Moco. I love that name. Jim and Dick are unprofessional, arrogant, and disrespectful. Dick pointed the .300 blackout gun toward the prosecution table, gave an evil grin, and said tempted. Forget those antics aside, Loni, whatever you think of it. What do you think the jury thinks of that? Because that is all that really matters, right?
Of the gun incident of the two
of the gun incident, but also, the rub against Dick this whole trial has been that he talks down to women. He's very old school. Yep. And it's I believe women have the majority on this jury. How problematic could that be for him when they close that deliberation room door?
Well, I'll tell you, just really quickly as to the guns, jurors are sitting there in their jury box, right? They don't have any protection when that gun's being waved around. I don't think anyone in the jury box feels comfortable with that gun being waved around so close to them. And so I don't think they like that. I'm not sure where the count is now on the jury because it keeps changing, but definitely the women were in the majority. I think there was 8 at one point, now then 7. I think it's very apparent to me that Dick Harpootlian treats women differently, whether they are, an expert or, working at the law firm, or, a family member or friend or someone who worked for the Murdaughs. I think he's very dismissive and very short and very patronizing, and it really rubs me the wrong way. And I can't imagine that it wouldn't rub the women in the jury the wrong way either. So as Taylor, not Todd, keeps saying, and I agree with this 100%, those jurors are looking at the attorneys the entire time. All right. They are bored. So they are watching everybody, and they're watching the attorneys, and they're seeing who they connect with, who they feel comfortable with, who they like, and who they don't like. That's just the reality of being in a jury trial. And so your personality and the way you treat people is something that the jurors look at, and then it influences how they see you as a person and your credibility. And I don't think that he's doing himself any favors, but I don't think he can help it. Honestly, I don't even know if he realizes it, that he comes across that way. But I do think that there's a chance that could impact the jury. And I think he underestimates the women in this case, because I think that a lot of the women are the ones who ended up sort of breaking the Murdaugh secret at the law firm. They're the ones who came forward and kind of broke through the brotherhood of all the law partners and the bank people who just kept giving him a pass and giving him a pass. And then the people who are standing up now that work for Murdaugh, whether it be Miss Shelley or Blanca, they're the ones who he, made comments to afterwards about, well, I was here for this long at Libby's house, and this is what I was wearing. And they both said, that's not true. And they spoke up and they said that on the stand under oath, but what he was saying was not true. So the women are really taking a strong position in this case. And I think to trying to be dismissive of them is not a smart move with the jury.
Mo Freedom writes, Buster should have been asked to verify his father's voice on the kennel video. Slam dunk question. I've seen this mentioned many times here on the sidebar. What do you think of that, Taylor? Should the state have asked him to verify that voice?
They didn't know the answer to that question, so they didn't ask that question. So that's why that didn't get asked. They didn't want the answer to it. They had enough people already there saying whose voice it was. They weren't going to take the chance of his only son left saying that's not his voice. Because again, I think that goes to, they don't know what the defense's theory is. I think we may actually get some witnesses recalled potentially from the state after the defense rests. I think there may be some recalled witnesses potentially. I'm not positive yet.
But Taylor, that's an excellent. I mean, you make a really great point. So the state could have said, "Is that your father's voice on the video?" And he could have said, "I'm not sure." And boom, that puts into question all the witnesses who affirmed that it was his voice, right?
Yes, and we may get some other witnesses called by the defense that state witnesses. We'll see. I'm not sure. But I don't think it's a question that they knew the answer to and that they were willing to risk or that they needed to risk. I really don't. So that's my theory on that, is why that question wasn't asked, because it could have come back and he said, no, that's not my father's voice. And then again, it's up to the jury to determine whose voice it was. So I guess, what, 3 people now at this point, 3 or 4 have said it was his son. And then it gets to the point where you're just sitting there. All right, let the jury decide. I think it's dangerous. It's a dangerous question for the prosecution.
Interesting, because I think a lot of people who are not attorneys are thinking it's such an obvious question, but you make a great point. Peggy Kenny writes, Buster's like his dad, no emotions. I think that had quite an impact on the jury, followed by Buster was just a prop for the defense, can't go after him hard. Loni, I thought this was interesting too. We learned from the OnStar that Alex Murdaugh called 911 just 17 seconds after his car arrived there. Yet he told dispatcher he'd already checked the bodies and even tried to turn them over. There was, quote unquote, blood everywhere. I see brain. He said in the call. That's pretty improbable in 17 seconds, right?
Well, that's why there was all this testimony even today about the headlights and could you see the bodies right when you pulled up. And another thing that the defense did that I thought was very effective, and I think attorneys should do this more often in the courtroom, I've done it before, is they set a timer for 20 seconds and let it just go. And everybody had to sit there silent in the courtroom for 20 seconds. And it was a lot longer than I think you would expect. And their point was, there is time there for perhaps to do what he says he did. But the problem is that's a double-edged sword, because on the other hand, the defense is arguing that the time, 15, 20 minutes he had from the time of the prosecution's alleged time of death to when he gets in his car and goes to Moselle is like 17 to 18 minutes. And that's not long enough to do everything he did. And, the prosecution might get up there and set the timer for 17, 18 minutes. And we're all going to sit there, in silence for that long and see how long it is. So it goes as a double-edged sword. But I think just gut reaction, a lot of people are going to say to go up, to look at the bodies, to be in shock if that's the first time you see it, to realize, wait a minute, because you're not going to just assume immediately, oh my goodness, this is my wife and my son dead on the ground, so it's going to take more time than just to look and start calling. You're going to want to go up. You're going to see what's happening. So I still think that's a good argument for the prosecution, but I thought the defense did a good job just playing out that 20 seconds for the jury.
Loni, you're 100% correct, though. That who would not go and grab their significant other, their wife, their kid, if they're laying on the ground? I mean, I can't imagine my son being on the ground. I can't imagine my wife. Now, we argue, don't get me wrong, but by God, if my wife is laying on the ground, I'm doing everything I can, and I'm probably breaking down. I would be a bloody mess if I came across that scene. So I have a problem with that, but I did this the other day. I said, we were having a discussion with some other folks, and I said, 1, 2, 3, and I counted to 20. I said, that took a long time, didn't it? I mean, I think, Joel, what's 20 seconds in a ring? You're an MMA guy. A lot can happen. How many, right? A lot can happen in 20 seconds in a ring. A lot can happen in 20 seconds on a wrestling mat. I mean, it's longer than I think people believe it is. So if he got up there and he rushed to, place to place, potentially, but again, the whole idea that he's not got blood on him and his family members are laying on the ground, I would at least try something to see if there. I get it that the head's blown up and that there's lots of blood, but still, you're not gonna get me to release my wife and my kid. I'm sorry. I mean, it's not gonna happen.
Excellent point. That came up yesterday. I would concur with you 1,000%. Cindy Garcia writes, of course, Buster said he heard they, not I. That, of course, from the famous I did him bad or they did him bad. That came up a few weeks ago. They asked Buster, but obviously, Loni, they walk him through this. They know exactly what he's going to say to them, and Buster knows what they're going to ask of him, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that he was well prepared, which you would expect that they would go through. They had a lot of different points they wanted to cover with him, and that was one of them. And he was very ready, and he said, it's they, which you wouldn't expect to say anything else, right, when they play the video. But he goes, I also know that because the first night when I first got there, the night of when they were killed, he told me the same thing. They did him bad. They did him bad. I've heard him say it before that a number of times since then. So that's why I know for sure that he was saying they. So I thought that was an interesting little twist that, only somebody like Buster who spent that much time with him could put that kind of testimony on.
So Taylor, off the top, when you joined us, and thank you again for joining us such short notice. For those who didn't hear, Amy Zimmercheck, who was scheduled to join, has COVID. Hopefully no more jurors get COVID. Amy Lawrence Lovely is out having a lovely time. Decided not to appear this Tuesday. So I'm going to put her in the doghouse. But anyway, Taylor, what sort of surprise are you? I know you it wouldn't be a surprise if you knew, but what could the surprises be this week? Because you say you're anticipating something. Give us a hint at what you're thinking.
Surprise. I'm trying to think of a surprise here.
By the way, does your wife think he's guilty of sin or no? Putting her on the spot.
I actually hadn't asked her that question. I haven't asked that question of her. You're
a real defense attorney. You're not even asking your wife. She's a what?
She is a true crime, lover. She pays for podcasts and all that kind of stuff, pays the extra subscriptions and all that, the after hour stuff. She loves this stuff. So
I better see her signing up for my Patreon then. I'm going to keep an eye out.
She loves it. Things have actually kind of starting to unfold as I thought they would. We're starting to hear some experts. I'm interested to see what additional potential experts they have. I hope they're a little bit more credible, a little bit, backed by some science here, that their credentials are a little bit better. Surprise. I'm anticipating the surprise of whether or not Alec decides to take the stand. I honestly believe he doesn't have anything to lose at this point. I don't think. I do kind of agree with Loni in terms of you kind of shifted the burden a little bit. But I'm not a fan of the theory of they just can't prove it. I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's a winning theory, and I don't go out there to hang a jury. I go out there to win. Okay. If I'm going to trial, I'm going to win, not to, all right, well, we got to come back and do this again. So it also depends though, whether or not, he wants to, and I got a feeling he probably does. He has, tricked people his entire career so far in the last, 10 years over stealing money. He's been able to manipulate banks. Who gets that kind of money loaned to them unsecured? Like, what kind of privilege is that? I make okay money, right? But like, they're wanting everything. They want me to sign away my first son. They want me to sign away my second daughter. But by God, what kind of bank? That's just unheard of. Where I can go, I need $600,000. Okay, we're gonna get it to you. What? No, you don't need any kind of financials. You don't need any kind of backings. No securities here. What are we talking about here? I'm just amazed by that. So that to me thinks that, all right, he feels like he could probably talk himself out of this. And that's dangerous. Very, very dangerous because, I assume his attorneys will say, well, they're going to ask you about this. They're going to ask you about that. What's your answer? I assume they've been going over this over and over and over again with him about what to expect. And his answers will likely be, if he does, yes, I did that. Yes, I lied. Yes, I cheated. Yes, I stole that money. Yes, I'm responsible for that. But I didn't do this murder. I didn't commit these murders. And the jury will like that. It's just, how does he come off? I don't know the guy. I've seen him one time. I saw him one time very shortly after this incident of the murders at a conference where he was there. And he passed through a room that I was in at the establishment that I was at. I don't know him. I don't know the family. So I've never had any kind of conversations of whether or not he's a well-liked individual, whether or not, you gravitate towards him. Because there's folks out there that, you come across and you're just like, dang, that's a good human being, right? Like that, I can trust that person, that I like that person. You want to be around that person, so I don't know that. Maybe people feel that way, and maybe that, he's successful. He had some good settlements, right? He made some money. I don't know how much that has to do with, the name and where he came from, but it continued on for a little bit at least. So he has that backing. So maybe, he's always been able to get what he wants, and he thinks that he can get up there and get what he wants. That's going to be my big surprise as to the decision that comes at the end. The question is, though, do you make him the last witness too? Do you make him the last witness or not? I've always believed that if you're going to put your client up on the witness stand, he can't be the only witness. That's a bad thing. Can't be the only witness. You got to have something else to support your theory. And kind of makes me think they're not going to put him up there, because I haven't seen a theory that he can just kind of hammer the nail down in the coffin. It's done. It's over with. He just, sewed up the entire theory that they've been, harping at the whole time. But I haven't seen that. So that kind of makes me think that they're not going to put him up.
But Loni, does he have to account for why he said he was asleep?
I think he's going to have to, give his timeline of that night. And I don't know if he's still going to stick to that he was in the house, because the expert they put on today was all about, if you're inside the house, you don't hear the gunshots. So I don't know why they would have put that expert on, unless it was just a waste of time, unless part of their theory is that he was in the house at the time of the gunshots. And I think that is the hardest thing for him to say, because he can get up there and give all these mea culpas about the financial and say, but I didn't do the murder. But then the prosecution's going to be, okay, then was that you on the kennel video? And if so, where were you when they actually got killed? And he has to explain that. When was the nap? What was he doing at the kennels? Why didn't he hear those gunshots? Those are the three questions that he has to come up with a theory for. And the only theory that I can even guess on is kind of what they, I think at some point, Dick threw this out as a theory as well, is that, he knew that they were going to focus on him. He was in shock. He was being aggressively questioned in that first interview, which was just the opposite. They could not have been more accommodating, law enforcement, to him. Through the first interview, through the search of his house. But that's kind of the way, that's what Dick said in the opening statement is, the reason why parts of that interview, that first interview, which is where he said he was asleep, may not have been accurate, is because he was in shock and they were just aggressively questioning him. So he kind of got flustered. So that leaves kind of this murky area for him to, decide what he's going to say now. And I still don't know, just like Taylor said, I still don't know what he's going to say, but that's the area right there that he has to come up with something to say to the jury and sell it to him. I don't think it's going to be perfect. It just has to be enough for those jurors who want to find him not guilty, just something from them to hang their hat on, something that makes it reasonable doubt.
And what's your take on the jury, Loni? What do you think? What do you think your take on the jury right now is?
Because one, I wish I was there. I could see them. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. And I hate that because I have a psychology background. So I love to watch people and try and read them. And I don't know. The other thing is people talk a lot about in this area, how much they're influenced by this family. So I don't know how much this jury is seeing this evidence through the lens of the Murdaugh, dynasty, et cetera, et cetera. If it's true the way the media puts it on, or if that's just sort of, a made up story. Because if there is this big mystique of the Murdaugh family, then sort of all bets are off on how they're really reading the evidence, because it might not be based on, an accurate reading of the evidence at all. So,
and that's a great point. Two more quick comments and we'll get some really quick closing thoughts. Mo Freedom: on June 10th, the Murdaughs were going to be sued for everything they own, including the Edisto Beach home. Maggie refused to sign it over as collateral. Alec was going to be exposed for embezzlement. He did it. And my favorite comment of the day from Linda Marks. So it was Peter Dinklage, right? The guy from Game of Thrones, is a little shorter than most. He came in a pinch here. J. Taylor Bell, former public defender, worked in the public defender's office, now a very savvy criminal defense attorney. Your final thoughts, Taylor?
Final thoughts. I think right now, from the defense, you're trying to find that one or two witnesses that are going to go to bat for you in the jury room. Try to keep them on your side. And I think the defense has to do a better job at not being so harsh, to being more open and trusting, and not so old school of, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And it's not a theory that works anymore, or a style. I apologize. It's not a style that works anymore. So I think that's what's going to have to go from here. I think right now, if you can get one or two people back there and you can hang the jury, I think it's a win for the defense. It buys more time. I don't think Alex is getting out. I think he's staying where he's at. I don't think he's getting a bond, no matter whether or not it's a hung jury or not. I think that they will plow forward on the financial crimes to start with and get a conviction on that, put them away, and then rethink whether or not they want to put their time and energy into the murder trial again. Though I do think it would be a kind of a political shortcoming for our attorney general if they do lose this trial. He's been there now for the last couple weeks. He's been there mostly throughout all the testimony, sitting at the table, hadn't asked any questions or got up there and taken any witnesses, but he's been there. And I think that shows that he's supporting his folks, which is a good thing. But if he happens to lose, I think it's a backfire because that he's been there and supporting them, and they didn't get the job done. And somebody's going to come in and say, you didn't get the job done when you should have gotten the job done. But that's political, not what's going to happen in the case. And I think, honestly, the trial of this murder case first was a political decision. So.
And Loni Coonbs, she is a former prosecutor. She's also a veteran legal commentator. You've seen her on everything from CNN to Investigation Discovery to the Today Show to The View and Dr. Phil. She's also the author of, I thought these were 3 different titles, but it's one title, You're Perfect and Other Lies Parents Tell, The Ugly Truth About Spoiling Your Kids, something I am guilty of doing. By the way, my 2 daughters got their yellow belts in jiu-jitsu today. A very happy father. They're only 8 and 7. They're learning to kick some you-know-what so they can handle bad guys. Hopefully that will never happen, but girl power. Loni, final thoughts.
I think that it will be fascinating to see if and when Alex takes a stand. And I think that the closing arguments, they're going to be really important in this case, because I think that for the prosecution, well, for both sides, honestly, they really need to tie up and make very clear what their theory is. I worry that the prosecution limited themselves in the way they charged this case and the way they argued it, that it was just Alec being the sole shooter and that only he was shooting, because I do think that some of the jurors might be thinking he's involved or there might be somebody helping him. And I don't want them to lose those jurors just because they're limited the theory of the case. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into these cases that can affect the outcome as well. So I think it's all still up in the air as to how this is going to end up.
Carrie G writes, freaking love the live shows, followed by Tilo. Hit the like button. Thank you, Tilo. Followed by live is great. And on that note, I will tell you, we will be live through the end of the Alex Murdaugh trial, which I probably just destroyed myself, because they'll probably go on another 3 weeks and I'll have to be live every night, but I'm a man of my word. This Friday, instead of 2:30 Eastern time, we will be live at noon Eastern time with Detective Phil Waters, who's investigated 400 homicide cases. And then Sunday night, we're following a super interesting case about a woman, Ellen Greenberg, who was found dead in her Philadelphia suburb apartment in 2011. She was stabbed 20 times, 10 to her back of her neck and the back of her head, 2 of them after her heart stopped beating, and it was ruled a suicide. Fascinating case, and we are following that. We're hoping to have her parents on this Sunday evening live at 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you to Taylor and Loni. Love you, America.